Why is a complete stranger living in the lakeside house I gave to Odessa? My grandfather Thayer spoke. His voice was never loud, but it was deep, strong, and serious. Even with the Christmas songs playing in the background, his voice made everyone stop what they were doing. It made the air in the room feel cold for a moment. A fork clinked as it fell onto a plate. My dad, Darian, had dropped it without even realizing it. I held my glass tightly and quietly looked at my family. My dad's face was pale and sweat shone on his forehead. My mom, Isolde, sitting next to him, looked shocked and afraid. Before I continue further, don't forget to subscribe and join the awesome community. Drop a comment below to tell me where you're watching from and what you think of the story. And my little sister, Leora, just frowned. She stopped playing with her smartphone, but she didn't seem to understand the seriousness of what was happening. Maybe she thought it had nothing to do with her. Dad, what do you mean by that? My dad asked, his voice shaking. This must be some kind of mistake, right? A mistake. My grandfather slowly put his wine glass down. He looked at my dad with sharp, serious eyes. These were not the kind, gentle eyes I had loved since I was a child. They were cold, judging, and full of anger. Last week I went straight to the lakeside house. I wanted to see it again. I remembered the times I had spent there, the happy memories and the smell of the lake in the air. I thought of all the times I had dreamed of returning. But when I got there, Odessa wasn't living in the house. Instead, there was a strange family having a barbecue in the backyard. They laughed and cooked as if the house belonged to them. I walked up to them and asked, "Excuse me, are you renting this house?" "Yes," they said. "We are renting it from Darian, the landlord." I was shocked. That was my dad. The house that my grandfather had given to me for my 20th birthday, my own house, had been given to strangers to live in. I heard my mother gasp softly. Why is something like this happening? Thought to myself. My own life felt so small and empty. I spent my days working from morning to night just to pay the rent for my tiny old apartment. And yet my parents and my sister had always lived so differently. Even though my parents had retired from their jobs many years ago, they seemed to always have plenty of money. They drove luxury cars, wore expensive clothes, and seemed to have everything they wanted. My sister Leora, even though she was 2 years younger than me, lived a life completely opposite to mine. Her social media was full of photos of fancy restaurant meals, overseas trips, shopping trips, and expensive presents. Every day she posted captions like, "Thanks Mom and Dad. Living my best life." I never understood why our lives were so different. Even though we were sisters, our worlds were completely apart. When I was a little girl, my parents always said to me, "Odessa, you are the eldest, so you must be patient. Let your little sister have more." I heard this over and over again. Eventually, I started to believe that I was not the child who was loved. I was the one who had to wait, who had to sacrifice, who had to be patient while everyone else got more. When I graduated from high school and moved out of the house, I didn't feel sad. I thought, I knew it. This is what my life will be like. Even on the way to today's Christmas party, I felt a little gloomy and tired. But I had a letter in my bag. It was from my grandfather, sent to me after 3 years. I held it tightly and forced myself to feel brave. When I arrived at the house, I could hear cheerful music and Christmas songs leaking from inside. The decorations were bright and beautiful. I rang the doorbell, but no one came out for a long time. Finally, my mother opened the door. "Oh, Odessa. So you came," she said, but she didn't look happy. Her face twisted into a frown, like I was a stranger she didn't want to see. "Grandpa invited me," I said. She hesitated. She seemed like she wanted to say something, but then she quickly forced a smile. "Yes, he asked your aunt for your address. Don't say anything unnecessary today. We are also celebrating Leora after all." Celebrating? I wondered. Leora had passed a small modeling audition. My mom was proud of her, and she gave me a look at my cheap coat as if it was silly. "Couldn't you wear something better?" "Come inside," she said. I stepped into the house. The fireplace was burning and the whole room smelled warm and cozy. The Christmas tree was bright, decorated with shining lights, balls, and ribbons. Everything looked expensive and beautiful. "Hey Odessa. Still alive?" my dad said, sitting on the sofa with a glass of champagne, speaking in a sarcastic tone. "Dad, stop it," I muttered. "Your sarcasm might rub off on me." Leora laughed in a high-pitched voice, twirling in her new dress. A large, sparkling ring glittered on her finger. Normally, I would have shrunk back and stayed quiet, hiding in a corner. But today felt different. At the back of the room, a figure slowly stood up. His back was straight, his white hair shone softly in the light, and his face looked kind and strong. "Odessa," my grandfather said. I ran to him and threw myself into his arms. I hugged him tightly. The familiar smell, the warmth, and the feeling of safety washed over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was home. "Thank you for coming, Odessa. You've been through a lot," he whispered softly. His words felt like a shield, protecting me from all the coldness and unfairness I had felt from my parents. Then he said, "Let's eat first. We will talk after." We all sat at the dining table. At first it seemed normal. My dad boasted about his business. My mom agreed with him, and Leora demanded one thing after another. I quietly ate my soup while watching my grandfather. He barely touched his meal. He just looked at all of us silently. The silence slowly grew heavier, like fog filling the room. It was strange and uncomfortable. When the main dish, the turkey, was carved and served, my grandfather finally spoke. "The other day I went to the lakeside house, but Odessa wasn't living there." "Why is that?" My world flipped upside down. My voice trembled as I asked, "What house are you talking about?" He looked at me with sad eyes and shook his head slowly. "They told you nothing, didn't they?" Then he turned to my parents. "Darian, Isolde, explain yourselves. What did you do with the house I gave Odessa for her 20th birthday 3 years ago?" My dad wiped his sweaty forehead and stammered. "Well, Odessa was still young and we thought it would be difficult for her to manage. So, we took care of it instead." My grandfather's voice became low and dangerous. "Took care of it by renting it out to strangers and keeping all the rent, including the monthly allowance I sent to Odessa? That is not taking care of it. That is stealing." "Yes, but it was for Odessa," my mother shouted. "She would have wasted the money. We were helping her." I couldn't stop myself. A dry, cold laugh came out of me and the whole room froze. My parents stared at me in shock. "What's so funny, Odessa?" my mom asked, her face twisted in anger. "For Odessa's sake, how can you lie so boldly?" I said, my eyes cold and steady. At my signal, my grandfather picked up the tablet on the table and slid it toward my parents. He pressed play. The video showed my parents 3 years ago. They were smiling, happy and young. Leora looked small and excited. "This house is so nice. Are you sure we can really use it?" my mom said in the recording. "Dad isn't coming back. We'll just keep it from Odessa. This house is too good for her," my dad said, taking an envelope full of cash from a man who looked like a real estate agent. Leora begged, and my dad said, "As long as we get rent from this house, your dreams can come true." The video switched. A strange family was entering the lakeside house. They laughed and acted like it was theirs. I had seen this video only 3 days ago. "What?" my dad said, his face pale. "You were fooled, Dad," I whispered. "Grandpa came back 3 days ago. The person who picked him up at the airport was me." My parents and Leora all turned pale. Grandpa cried when he saw how tired and worn out I was. For the first time in years, he looked truly sad and worried. We went straight to the bank and checked every single transaction. Then we went to the lakeside house together. The strange family was having a barbecue just like I had seen before. But now my grandfather, my parents, and I saw everything with our own eyes. Finally, we all understood the truth. I put both my hands on the table and stared hard at my parents. I wanted them to understand that I already knew everything. Before I even came to today's party, I knew the truth. I knew that my parents had faked my signature. I knew that they had rented out my house without asking me. I knew that they had taken all the money for themselves. I had worked so hard to earn my own money and they had spent it on themselves. My father's face turned pale. His voice shook as he spoke. "Odessa, you knew?" "Yes," I said quietly but firmly. "And you stayed quiet. You didn't say anything even when you saw it happening. You let it happen." I looked at them with disappointment in my eyes. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a little bit of goodness in them. Maybe they would admit their mistakes and say sorry when Grandpa found out. I had hoped. I wanted to believe that they had some humanity left in them. I shook my head slowly. But the truth was, I wasn't surprised. I had expected this. They were full of excuses. They lied to protect themselves. I felt disgusted. "No, Odessa, this is..." I looked at my grandfather. He gave me a small nod, a tiny signal that it was time for me to take charge. From that moment I knew it was my turn to end all of this. "Grandpa, that's enough," I said quietly. "I don't want to deal with people like them anymore." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick envelope. I slammed it on the table. The sound echoed in the room and my parents flinched. I slowly opened the envelope and showed them one document. My name was written on it, but the handwriting was not mine. "This is a property management authorization form," I said. "It seems my signature was faked. You used it to rent out the house. The tenants have been paying $2,000 every month for the last 3 years, haven't they? $2,000 every single month. That was about what I earned from working very hard. For 3 years that money had gone somewhere else without me knowing. I had worked, saved, and struggled, and they had taken it." "That's not all," my grandfather said. He pulled out a big pile of letters. The envelopes had been opened before. I remembered something. Every month I sent Odessa $1,000 to support her. I had also written letters to her. I asked her how she was, if she was happy, and if she was having any problems. But I never received a single reply. When I called, they always said the same thing: "Odessa is busy. She's going through a rebellious phase. She doesn't want to talk." I picked up the letters. The dates went back 3 years, all the way to last month. They were all addressed to me. Every single one of them. I had written them to my beloved Odessa. Even though I now knew the truth, I couldn't help the tears that fell from my eyes. I had believed that my grandfather had left me behind. I thought he had moved far away, lived happily, and forgotten about me. I was wrong. Grandpa had always been thinking about me. All along it was not him who had abandoned me. It was my parents. They had pushed me into loneliness. I remembered all the times I had spent with Grandpa as a child. We shared hobbies. We loved collecting antiques. We spent hours looking at old stamps and imagining the lives of the people who once owned them. I loved those moments. They were my happiest memories. But 3 years ago, Grandpa moved to Europe. He went to start a business with an old friend. At the airport, before we said goodbye, he held me tightly. He whispered, "Odessa, be strong. I've prepared a place where you can live freely. Never let anyone else decide your worth." That was the last time I saw him. After that, I had no more contact. My parents had told me, "Grandpa is busy. He can't talk to you for a while." I had believed them. I had thought it was true. But now I know. Grandpa would never have abandoned me. The place he had prepared for me, the place where I could live freely, was the lakeside house. I snapped back to reality. My parents sat in front of me. They looked frightened and angry. I could see the panic in their eyes. "You used my memories with Grandpa," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You used my future. You turned everything into money and spent it on yourselves, didn't you?" "No, that's not true, Odessa," my father said. He leaned over the table and tried to grab the papers. "It's just a misunderstanding. We were only borrowing it temporarily. We were going to return it." "Yes, that's right. We saved it. We saved the money for you." "Lies," my grandfather shouted. He slapped my father's hand away. "I hired a private investigator. Every payment went to your account, Darian. All the records were checked. The balance is 0. And I know you've been juggling credit cards to keep up." My father collapsed to his knees. "Why?" I screamed. "Why would you do this? You knew how hard I was struggling every single day. And you still took it. While I was barely surviving, you used the money to buy new cars, expensive clothes, and to give Leora a life of luxury." "Odessa, you're wrong," my mother shouted. "We were only making good use of it. You were too young. You couldn't manage a house on your own. That's why we did it for you. We raised the family's living standard. You're part of this family too. If we are happy, you should be happy as well." Her words were so selfish that I couldn't even find words to respond. "Family," I muttered, my voice shaking with disbelief. "Silence," my grandfather roared. His voice shook the room. My mother gasped. "What you did was not for the family," Grandpa said. "It was exploitation. You were like parasites feeding on your own daughter. Every dollar you took went to Leora's tuition, her trips abroad, and your own spending. Not 1 cent was for Odessa." My father, drenched in sweat, clung to the table. "Legally, as her guardians, we could manage it. Odessa is an adult." Grandpa looked at him coldly. "Forging her signature is a serious crime. You committed embezzlement, fraud, and forgery. These are crimes, not small mistakes. You did much more than just one thing wrong." "Fraud." Leora said in a small, surprised voice. She finally understood how serious it was. Are you saying our trips, our clothes, our new things, they were all paid with Odessa's money? No way. She's just plain Odessa. How could she have money worth taking? Her words hurt me. To her, I was worthless. My parents had kept me poor on purpose just to take advantage of me. They wanted me to stay small, weak, and helpless. And now I understand. They had been feeding on my hard work all along, enjoying the power they had over me. I stood up slowly. I looked down at them. The people who used to control and scare me now looked small and weak. They were nothing more than petty thieves. Dad, Mom, I said, my voice firm. You're not my parents anymore. You are just thieves. Odessa, how dare you speak to us like that? My father tried to yell, but my grandfather's cold stare stopped him. He swallowed his words. Darian, Isolde, my grandfather said quietly, but his voice was strong. Your excuses end here. Another complete set of this evidence has already been submitted. Submitted? My father's face turned pale. I spoke with my lawyer, my grandfather continued. Everything has been sent to the police. The police? My mother screamed. She jumped out of her chair. You are crazy. How could you report your own family? You've lost your mind. At that moment, Leora started screaming and crying. No. I don't want the police. I can't be a model now. It's all their fault. I didn't know anything. I was just a kid. It's not my fault. My mother looked at her daughter as if she was seeing her for the first time. The child she had spoiled and loved had turned against her in the end. I looked down at my parents with icy eyes. I am calm now. So calm that even I was surprised. That's enough, I said softly. I don't want to hear any more excuses or blame shifting. Grandpa, that's enough. Grandpa nodded. His face was sad, but his voice was steady. Yes, I agree. There is no need to let this house stay filled with lies and greed any longer. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Ding dong. Ding dong. They're here, I whispered. My father suddenly collapsed onto the floor. It happened so quickly that I could barely react. My mother, Isolde, let out a loud cry and clutched her head, shaking all over. She looked completely helpless and scared. Leora, my younger cousin, held her phone tightly in both hands. She backed herself into a corner, trying to make herself invisible, but there was nowhere left for her to hide. The fear in the room was almost like a heavy fog. I could feel it pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. My grandfather, Thayer, looked at me with his calm, kind eyes. His face was gentle, but there was a hint of pride in the way he looked at me. He spoke softly, almost like a whisper that somehow cut through all the chaos in the room. Odessa, go and open the door, he said. I nodded, trying to steady myself. My legs felt like they were filled with lead, heavy and slow, but I took step after step toward the door. Every step felt like it carried years of my life's fear, pain, and frustration. My hand hovered over the doorknob. I paused and took a long, deep breath. My chest rose and fell slowly. Once I opened this door, there would be no turning back. This would be the moment I finally took control of my life, the moment I would stop being trapped under my parents' control. I reached out and turned the knob. As the door swung open, I saw 2 police officers standing there. Their uniforms were neat, their badges shiny, and their faces serious. Between them stood Cale, my grandfather's lawyer. Cale had a stern expression and he carried a large leather briefcase. He walked straight toward my grandfather. Thayer, I'm sorry I'm late, Cale said politely. The paperwork took longer than I expected, but everything is ready now. We made it in time. Thank you, Cale, my grandfather replied, his voice calm. The police officers stepped into the room. Their presence made the air feel heavy and tense. My mother, Isolde, let out a small shriek and tried to hide behind my father, Darian. But Darian himself had collapsed onto the floor and couldn't even stand to protect her. His face was pale and his hands shook as he tried to sit up. Darian Logan and Isolde Logan, correct? One of the officers said in a firm, loud voice. We request that you come with us to the police station. My father tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. Come with you? This must be some kind of mistake. He struggled to get to his feet, his pride fighting against his fear. This is nothing more than a family dispute. I'm fine. It's just emotions. Cale stepped forward sharply. His eyes were cold, his voice sharp and precise. He opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents, then handed them to my father. These papers contain evidence of all the crimes you have committed. Embezzlement, fraud, forging private documents, and most of all, the unlawful use of your daughter's property. The victim's report has already been filed. That's an exaggeration, my father said, his voice trembling. It is not exaggerated, Cale said, his voice cold as ice. The complaint has already been submitted with Miss Odessa's signature. My father's eyes widened. A complaint? Odessa, you can't be serious. You're really going to betray your own parents. I let out a small, cold laugh. Betray? No. I simply followed the proper steps to take back what was mine. I didn't do this because my grandfather told me to. 3 days ago I discovered the full truth. I cried in front of him, yes. But after that I asked him to call a lawyer. I told him, I want to settle this with my own hands. He respected my decision and prepared everything for today. That's a lie. A lie, my mother screamed suddenly. Her voice was full of panic and anger. I'm not the bad one. Darian wanted all of this. I was against it. He said, who cares about Odessa as long as we're having fun? What? My father shouted, shocked and angry. Don't you dare lie, Isolde. You were the one who wanted a new fur coat. You were the one excited about sending Leora abroad. You forged the authorization forms yourself. You told me to write it, my mother shouted back. Right there in front of the police officers, my parents began blaming each other. I watched quietly, almost as if I were floating above the room, looking down at something that was not really happening to me. The parents who had once seemed so strong, so frightening, now looked small, selfish, and scared. Their pride and dignity were gone. Only fear and panic remained. Stop. Just stop already. Leora screamed, covering her ears. Dad, Mom, you're the worst. What about me? I didn't do anything. I'm not going to be arrested, right? Cale, the lawyer, looked down at Leora with a gentle, pitying gaze. Young lady, you may not have been a direct perpetrator, but if you enjoyed luxuries paid for with stolen money while knowing the circumstances and stayed silent, you bear moral responsibility. And your ring, your bag, and all your fancy items may be taken as evidence. No. I won't give them up. Leora shouted, clutching her bag and stepping back. One of the officers calmly approached her and extended a gentle hand. Come along, please, he said kindly. The officers handcuffed my father and mother. The sound of the cold metal rings clinking together echoed through the room. Odessa! Help me, my mother cried desperately. I'm sorry. We are family. Please take back the complaint. Odessa, forgive us. I don't want to go to prison, my father begged. I looked straight at them. There was no fear left inside me. No hesitation. Only a clear, firm resolve. Goodbye. Never appear in front of me again. Their screams faded as the police led them out. The red lights of the police car flashed violently outside the window, painting the room in streaks of color. Then finally everything was quiet. I turned toward my grandfather. He nodded in satisfaction and gave me a small thumbs up. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I stood tall on my own 2 feet and looked toward the future. I would never let anyone interfere with my life again. This was the first victory I had earned entirely by my own will. The following months were full of chaos and change. My father and mother went to prison. Leora, thankfully, did not face prosecution because she had not been directly involved, but she still suffered huge losses. All the luxurious things my parents had given her, jewelry, designer bags, expensive cars, and even her home, were confiscated. The friends who had spoiled her and played with her vanished the moment she became the daughter of criminals. She had lost her life of comfort overnight. Meanwhile, I was living the most fulfilling days of my life. Under my grandfather's guidance, I studied business, management, and money carefully. Every day I learned something new. I studied hard because I wanted to stand on my own feet. And within a few months, I became capable of helping my grandfather as his right-hand assistant. I could manage his assets, make important decisions, and help run his life like a real adult. No longer dependent on anyone, I felt confident and free. That confidence released me from the heavy chains of my past. I no longer felt fear when I thought about my parents. I was strong, independent, and ready to live my life fully. One rainy night, I received a call on my new cell phone from an unknown number. When I answered, it was Leora calling from a public phone. Her voice sounded small, helpless, and dependent. Odessa, I don't have anywhere to stay. None of my friends will help me. Please, "Please help me," she said, her voice trembling. I listened quietly. Her voice was the same spoiled, dependent tone she had always used. I spoke softly but firmly. "Go work. Learn to live on your own just like I did." Then I hung up the phone abruptly. My chest hurt a little, but more than that, I felt a strange, refreshing sense of relief. With that, I knew I had truly cut the ties with my past. I had finally walked away from the people who had controlled me and hurt me for so long. I was free. Several years passed. The lakeside house became a warm, precious home where my grandfather and I lived together. The chains that had once bound me were gone forever. I had no desire to know how my parents or Leora were doing. They had chosen their paths and I had chosen mine. That was enough. I walked the path I wanted, built the life I wanted, and learned to enjoy my freedom every single day. The life I had imagined for so long, a life where I could make my own choices, finally belonged to me. And I knew that no one could ever take it away again. The feeling of standing on my own feet was amazing. I could go wherever I wanted, make the decisions I wanted, and live without fear. I could laugh, cry, and feel proud of myself. Every day was full of learning, growth, and happiness. I no longer worried about being controlled by anyone else. Sometimes, when I looked at my grandfather, I saw the same pride in his eyes that I felt in my own heart. He had guided me, taught me, and protected me, but he also let me make my own choices. And that made me stronger. I had finally won. Not by hurting others, but by standing up for myself and taking what was rightfully mine. And that victory felt sweeter than anything I had ever imagined. Now the house was quiet at night. Rain sometimes fell outside and I could hear it tapping softly against the windows. I would sit by the window thinking about how far I had come. How I had faced fear, betrayal, and sadness, and yet I had survived. I had grown. I had won. I didn't need my parents to approve of me anymore. I didn't need anyone to validate my choices. I had learned to trust myself. And that was the most important thing of all. The past was gone. I didn't dwell on it. I focused on the future, on the life I wanted to create. I wanted to help others, learn more, and keep growing. And most importantly, I wanted to be happy. Years later, when I looked back, I realized that everything had happened exactly as it needed to. Every tear, every fear, every moment of uncertainty had brought me here. To freedom. To strength. To happiness. To a life that was mine, entirely mine. And that was all that mattered.